Do boundaries help you build healthy relationships? Or do some of them actually drive a wedge between you and your loved ones without us even realizing it? We often hear that boundaries are the ultimate act of self-love. They're meant to safeguard our emotional well-being and nurture healthy relationships. But here's the twist. Certain boundaries, which I call Nuke Boundaries, might look like self-care on the surface, but they're more like emotional toxins, eroding your self-worth and silently harming your connections. The most surprising part? Most of us don't even realize when such boundaries creep up. We think they're about self-care, but instead they build walls that isolate relationships from true intimacy and connection. In this video, we'll explore 5 subtle but harmful patterns of Nuke Boundaries. You'll learn to recognize when others use them against you, and even more importantly, when you might be using them yourself, so you can break the cycle, take better actions, and create a wholesome environment for you and others around you. Let's dive into the first toxic boundary, the unrealistic pattern. Boundaries are supposed to be rooted in self-love and respect, guiding us to protect our emotional well-being. But what happens when a boundary crosses the line into an impossible demand that erodes inner peace? Imagine this. Your partner insists you cut off all your friends because they feel betrayed whenever you spend time away from them. At first, it might seem like they just crave more quality time, but in reality, it's not about love. It's about deep-rooted fear and the desperate need to control the occurrence of pain. It's a boundary that stems from deep-seated insecurities and doesn't foster a healthy environment for the relationship. The person making this demand may not even realize how unreasonable it is because they're acting out of their own pain. They believe rigid rules will help them maintain their boundary, but instead, it only creates more suffering. The receiver feels trapped, guilty, and resentful, while the one setting the boundary remains anxious because their impossible standards are never met. It's a cycle of disconnection that drains self-worth and damages the relationship. To move beyond this pattern, it's important to move from fear to trust and from control to open-hearted communication. When we replace unrealistic boundaries with compassionate dialogue, we don't just shield our relationships, we nurture and heal them. Next up is the punishment pattern. This is one of the most damaging forms of Nuke Boundaries because it transforms a tool meant for healthy communication into a weapon of resentment. Instead of setting boundaries to foster understanding, they are used, often unconsciously, as a means of retaliation or manipulation. This pattern usually arises from a sense of powerlessness or hurt. When someone feels deeply wounded and believes their pain can't be healed, they may attempt to restore a sense of balance by inflicting similar pain on the other person by punishing them in some way, turning the boundary into an act of punishment rather than protection. This can look like giving the silent treatment or withdrawing as a way of expressing hurt. On the surface, it might seem like a form of self-protection, but it actually creates emotional distance and breeds resentment. The real issue with this approach is that it doesn't address the underlying problem. It leaves the other person feeling confused, hurt, and unsure of how to make things right. Over time, this pattern can create a toxic dynamic where both parties are too afraid to express their truth. To overcome this punishing patterns in a relationship, it's important to move from a mindset of retaliation to one of repair. When we replace punishment with honest, compassionate communication, we create a space for emotional healing and deeper connection. The next Nuke boundary is the chaotic pattern, is when a boundary is inconsistent. While healthy boundaries can shift and evolve over time, they're communicated clearly when they change. Nuke boundaries, on the other hand, are unpredictable. One day a behavior is okay, and the next, it's not, leaving the other person feeling confused, insecure, and destabilized. It's like walking through a minefield where the rules are constantly changing, making it impossible to navigate with confidence. People often behave this way because they struggle to process their shifting emotions. As their emotions fluctuate, it creates inner turmoil that they unconsciously project outward, leading to misunderstandings and conflict. The confusion they experience is actually rooted deep within themselves, and this unresolved internal confusion manifests in their external interactions. Imagine this scenario. A friend enthusiastically agrees to help you with a project, but later, they accuse you of taking advantage of them. You're left wondering what happened. Wasn't it their choice to help? The issue isn't their boundary, but the lack of clear, honest communication when their feelings shifted. They might not have realized they were uncomfortable until later, but instead of addressing it openly, they react with blame, creating confusion and conflict. To break this cycle and restore harmony, it's crucial to address the root cause, the inability to process changing emotions. Developing self-awareness is key here. If you or someone you know tends to fall into this pattern, practicing mindfulness can help cultivate emotional stability and bring a sense of inner peace, which then helps in processing these changing emotions without snapping at others. Now let's look at the me pattern. When a boundary is used to shut down conversations and prioritize only one person's needs, it transforms into what I call the me pattern, a classic Nuke boundary. The me pattern might sound reasonable at first. After all, everyone has a right to set boundaries, right? But in practice, it often becomes a way to dismiss the other person's feelings entirely. It's as if the conversation hits a brick wall with a sign that says, "My needs are the only ones that matter here." Instead of fostering connection, this pattern creates a power imbalance, placing the enforcer's emotions above everything else. Over time, this leads to resentment, frustration, and emotional invalidation. The person on the receiving end feels unheard, undervalued, and distanced from genuine connection. People often react this way when they fear that continuing the situation might lead to losing their position or getting hurt. As a result, they choose to avoid the situation entirely, opting to disengage rather than confront their discomfort. This behavior typically stems from a deep-seated need for self-protection, driven by fear. To move beyond the me pattern, we need to shift from self-protection to mutual respect. This way we embrace open, compassionate dialogue and pave the way for true understanding, deeper intimacy, and emotional healing. And finally, we're at the silenced pattern. The silenced pattern revolves around unspoken boundaries, the expectations we never voice, but still hold others accountable for. It's something we all do without realizing it. We assume that people around us share our values or know our preferences, and when they unknowingly cross these invisible lines, we feel hurt or offended. This isn't the other person intentionally breaching a boundary. It's actually a breakdown in communication. Think about a situation where you felt upset because a friend didn't check in on you during a tough time. You might feel that they should have known you needed support, but did you actually express that need? Often these unspoken expectations are rooted in our personal experiences or habits, and we assume they're universal when they're not. The silenced pattern leads to misunderstandings and unnecessary conflict. The other person feels blindsided, while you're left feeling unloved or disrespected. The fix is simple but powerful. Communicate your boundaries out loud. Instead of assuming someone knows what you need, say it clearly. When I'm feeling down, I really appreciate a quick check-in. It helps me feel supported. By bringing these silent boundaries into the open, you replace assumptions with clarity, strengthening the relationship instead of letting hurt feelings fester. Boundaries are powerful tools for nurturing self-love, emotional healing, and healthier relationships, but only when they're used mindfully. As we've already seen, not all boundaries are rooted in genuine care. Some can unintentionally harm our connections, masking fear or control as self-protection. By recognizing these toxic patterns and shifting towards open, compassionate communication, we can transform our boundaries into bridges that foster trust, understanding, and true connection. Be sure to subscribe, and if you want to learn ways of how you can start setting boundaries in your life, watch the video and understand how you can start prioritizing yourself for your happiness. Remember, growth starts with small steps. Notice your boundaries this week. Are they fostering connection or building walls? Habitual Harmony is here to help you create a life you can be proud of, a life of abundance and self-love.